And the refrain that you've had ever since as long as you can remember is try harder. You've got so much potential. You're so smart. You could do so much. Get your act together, clean it up, try harder. And of course, that just drives your self-esteem down further and further and further because you know you're trying as hard as you can. You're trying, and yet it takes you 8 hours to do homework that it takes another kid 1 hour to do. Or as an adult, you have a brilliant proposal and you show up at the wrong place on the wrong day and it never, gets the attention it deserves. So chronic underachievement until the diagnosis is made.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber. Today, I'm bringing you my conversation with Dr. Ned Hallowell, a board-certified child and adult psychiatrist and world authority on ADHD. Ned is the founder of the Hallowell ADHD centers in Boston, Metro West, New York City, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Seattle. He's spent the past 4 decades helping thousands of adults and children live happy and productive lives through his strengths-based approach to neurodiversity, and has ADHD and dyslexia himself. He's also a New York Times bestselling author and has written 20 books on multiple psychological topics. You'll hear more about his newest book, ADHD 2.0, later in this episode. Also, Ned has a brand new podcast out called Dr. Hallowell's Wonderful World of Different, which celebrates the many differences that adorn humanity. So definitely check that out after you listen to this episode. In this conversation, we talked about Ned's strengths-based approach to ADHD and how it can change the outlook for someone with ADHD, his thoughts about medication, what finding the right difficult means, and how parents can help their kids find theirs, and how to create safe and stellar environments for our children to thrive as themselves. As always, if you want to dive deeper into my conversation, please check out the show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There, you'll find a bullet-pointed list of key takeaways, a transcript of the episode, links to all of the resources mentioned, and a podcast player with the episode broken down into chapters. So if you want to go back and re-listen to a specific piece of the conversation, you can easily find it. This week's episode can be found at tiltparenting.com/session275. Or just go to the podcast tab on Tilt Parenting and click on this episode at the top of the page. Thanks so much. And now here is my conversation with Ned. Hey, Ned, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be with you.
I feel like this is such an overdue conversation because I've certainly been following your work for years. I think we've been in similar summits for parents. And so I'm just really excited to talk about your new book, ADHD 2.0, today. You've obviously been working in this space for a long time and have been a thought leader when it comes to ADHD. And I'm just wondering if you could share what things have changed and that really inspired you to say, all right, it's time to write this new book within the landscape of ADHD.
Well, to give you a personal timeline, I'd never heard of this condition until I'd finished college, medical school, residency, and I was doing a fellowship in child psychiatry at the old Mass Mental Health Center, which is a Harvard training program. And I had early in July of 1981, attended a lecture about a condition that I'd never heard of, attention deficit disorder. That's what it was called then. And if you told me before then someone had attention deficit disorder, I thought it was some psychoanalytic concept about a kid who didn't get enough attention. So that's how uninformed I was in 1981. But that was a real aha moment for me because I realized 2 things. Number one, that I had the condition myself. I'd always known I had dyslexia, but now I knew I had this thing. And also that the medical model, the deficit disorder model, really missed, a lot of the story. All the good part they leave out, which, that's what the medical model does. You don't go to the doctor because you feel so good. You go to the doctor because you feel bad. So I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying it's unfortunate that the medical model is what where this condition got its start. And if you trace it back, it used to be called minimal brain dysfunction. I mean, talk about pathology based. Well, so then in throughout the 80s, I just saw a lot of people who had it. My patients were my textbook because there were no textbooks. And the textbooks that there were left out all the good stuff. So I just sat and listened to my patients, whether they were children or adults. And in 1994, John Rady and I came out with Driven to Distraction, which turned out to be, much to our surprise, we thought it would sell maybe 10,000 copies. Well, it's now sold 2 million copies, and it really put what was called ADD on the map, and it's still the case. People don't understand it, but so we did Driven Distraction in 2004, then Delivered from Distraction in 2005. And so, more than, about 15 years had passed since we did Delivered from Distraction. So it was time for a new book because there was a lot of new stuff. And also, I thought that, both Driven and Delivered are, I think, wonderful books, but they're long. And people with ADD don't want to read long books. So I in ADHD 2.0, it's only about 100 pages. It's less than 50,000 words. When my other books were well over 100,000 words. So this was an exercise in concision, if that's a word. It's very concise, but that makes it ADD friendly. So and the new stuff that was in there. And I really wanted to nail down the strength-based model. That this is not, in my opinion, purely a disorder. It certainly has its downside, but it also has a tremendous upside. So I say, it's a mixed bag, and my job is to maximize the upside for my patients and to minimize the downside. And invariably, you can, if you come to see me, I guarantee you will get better. The only question is how much better. I can guarantee without any doubt whatsoever that your life will improve. The only question is how much improvement. And that's why it's such a wonderful condition to work with, because unlike most diagnoses in medicine, I deliver good news. Usually when a doctor delivers a diagnosis, it's not happy. But this is wonderful news. Like I said, your life can only get better. If you've been living with this condition, whether you're 6 years old or 60 years old, you've been struggling in ways that an analogy I use is sort of like you've been driving on square wheels. It takes a lot of effort to make progress. But as a group, we are very, very determined, very never give up, very gritty. So, we'll drive on the square wheels. Another analogy I use, it's like being nearsighted and not having the benefit of eyeglasses. So you're straining and squinting, and you're trying so hard just to see what's in front of you, and so you're bumping into things, missing things, and the refrain that you've had ever since as long as you can remember is try harder. You've got so much potential. You're so smart. You could do so much. Get your act together, clean it up, try harder. And of course, that just drives your self-esteem down further and further and further, because you're trying as hard as you can. You're trying, and yet it takes you 8 hours to do homework that it takes another kid 1 hour to do. Or as an adult, you have a brilliant proposal and you show up at the wrong place on the wrong day, and it never, gets the attention it deserves. So chronic underachievement until the diagnosis is made. It's a tale of chronic underachievement. You may succeed at a very high level, but you could be doing better. You could get more done with less effort if you had the diagnosis. So it's a good news diagnosis. And I guess in writing this book, I'm frustrated because even now in 2021, most people still don't get it. They don't understand what this really is. They still think, oh, it's a terrible thing. It means you're stupid and lazy and irresponsible, and you're going to, do nothing but mess up throughout your life. And that takes a toll. So, by the time they become adults, usually their self-esteem is not good. And so anyway, so I'm very passionate about trying to bring people the truth, the knowledge, the facts, and shatter stigma as much as possible, and give them a basis upon which to achieve their dreams, and these folks tend to be big dreamers, although by the time they become adults, often they've given up on their dreams because they think they're just an incorrigible loser.
Well, the strengths-based approach comes through so clearly. And yeah, you're right. I think for people who don't know much about ADHD, there's this generalized idea of what it is. And in reading through your book, which thank you for keeping it brief, I actually listened to it, and then I also had it on my Kindle so I could go back and kind of highlight things. But I really appreciated the way that you described, you call it the paradoxical tendencies. But I was reading, and everything was just like, I was like, Asher, my 17-year-old, you have to listen to this. And I would read him a passage and was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly how I feel. And it was just, I could see how empowering it was to see it described, that focus and that deep dive into projects. And then what happens when you need to move to something else, and the disappointment and this negative self-talk and this cycle. It was just such a powerful way to see himself represented in the book.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because that, it really is an example where the truth shall set you free. And when they realize that I'm not BSing them, that in fact it's correct, then whoa, they can really take off. It takes some work. I say, ADD is a gift that's hard to unwrap, and until you unwrap it, it can be a curse. So Russ Barkley has shown over and over again that undealt with, this condition is horrible. I mean, he's done the statistics, and it costs you about 13 years of life if it's not dealt with properly. Overrepresented in the prisons, in the addicted population, in the unemployed, the marginalized, the multiply divorced, just the unhappy and frustrated. And so, yeah, until you come to terms with it, it can absolutely ruin your life. But good news, when you do come to terms with it, and if you're working with a doctor who can do something other than just give you medication, then a complete reconstruction of your life is what happens, and you take off.
So I want to talk about some of the strategies, because you do share a lot of wonderful strategies and tools for supporting yourself if you have ADHD, or things that we as parents can help our kids with. But I wanted to ask you about this term VAST, which you talk about in the book, which was a new concept for me, as you sometimes interchanged it or use it in addition to ADHD. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Well, first of all, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a terrible term. We do not have a deficit of attention. It's flat out wrong. We have an abundance of attention. Our challenge is to control it. If it were a deficit of attention, it would be a form of dementia, which it certainly is not. If anything, we're gifted. So need to get rid of the word deficit. And then disorder, it has its downside, but it also has its upside. So I prefer to call it a trait. And depending upon how you manage it, it's positive or negative. So VAST, and the two key elements are attention and stimulation. We're always looking for high stimulation, and our attention wanders. It doesn't go empty, but it wanders. So coined the term that was actually suggested to me by a woman who was working for KQED at the time in San Francisco. Now she works at, she's in Washington, but Carrie Feibel, and she came up with this idea of variable attention stimulus trait, VAST, a far more accurate term. Attention varies in ADD, and stimulation, the search for stimulation, is sort of one of the guiding forces. Boredom is our kryptonite. We can't do boredom, and yet stimulation, then we're riveted. We can pay super attention. So it's a more accurate term than ADHD. ADHD is grossly inaccurate. And also, I wanted to expand the DSM-5 definition, because there are people who can benefit from help who do not meet the strict criteria you see in the diagnostic manual. So if you're being honest, you can't say, I have ADHD as it is defined in the DSM-5, and that's the definition, is how it's defined there. But there were a lot of people that I see in my practice that don't meet the strict criteria, but still have a treatable condition. They still need help. So VAST has a wider boundary than ADHD.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon. And that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls, and with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free. There are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. And I would think too, now even we're still in this COVID pandemic a year and a half in, and I can only imagine that people are really noticing inability to focus right now more than ever before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, modern life is ADD-ogenic, and even before COVID. And then you throw in social isolation. I say we're suffering from a massive vitamin C deficiency, vitamin Connect. And vitamin Connect is every bit as important as ascorbic acid, So you throw together the crazy pace of modern life where we're asking our brains to process exponentially more data points than ever before in human history. And then you complicate it further by having us isolated and fearful and, wearing masks and being afraid and dying, literally 700,000 deaths in this country. And so yeah, it's a recipe for environmentally induced problems. The true condition of what is still called ADHD is genetically transmitted 90% of the time. But then there's this onlog of this extra kick that comes from, epigenetics, from environmental influences, but again, this can be dealt with. I never leave on a sour note. This is absolutely deal withable. I'm 71. I've been living with it my whole life as well as dyslexia. And I've, like to think I've done well. And I'm small potatoes. There are Nobel Prize winners who have it, Pulitzer Prize winners, Academy Award winners, major league athletes in all sports, world-class chefs, Supreme Court justice. You name the field, and I can name you someone who's at the very top who has it. It's just so important that people understand and get the diagnosis before they lose too much ground in life.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about this podcast and the community that I serve is it is predominantly parents and caregivers. So we're talking to people with little ones, to teenagers, to young adults. So there is so much possibility and potential for getting supports that they need. I want to talk about some of the different strategies that you include, because there were some things in the book that were new to me. I do want to just take a moment to touch on medication, because that comes up, I'm sure, all the time in your work. And I have a Tilt Together Facebook community, and I would say, I don't know, a good third of conversations are a parent inquiring about medication for this or that, a lot of which is ADHD. So can you just talk about your perspective on the efficacy of ADHD medication, or some general thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic because this is a really good news story that most people think of as bad news. I mean, medication has a terrible press, which is a shame, because stimulant medication is used properly as a wonder drug. I mean, it's like eyeglasses. When it works, it allows you to focus like nothing else can. And all the non-medication interventions work better if you're lucky enough that the medication works for you. And it works about 80% of the time. In my case, it does not work. So coffee is my medication. But 80% is a pretty good batting average. All three of our kids have it, and they're doing great on medication. And really, the worst thing about medication is most people are afraid of it. In the chapter in the book, I call it the most powerful tool everyone fears. And it's a shame, that they think of it as a drastic last-ditch intervention. And, they say, well, can't we do a year or two of non-medication treatment first? And I say, sure we can. And I've written books about how to do that. But it's sort of like saying, why don't we do a year or two of squinting before we try eyeglasses? Why not try the proven intervention that's really safe, as long as you have a doctor who knows what he or she is doing? The meds, it's a really wonderful story, and yet most people are afraid of it. They say, well, what about the side effects? Well, first of all the side effects are immediately reversible by changing the dose or discontinuing the medication. And second of all, the side effects you really ought to worry about are the side effects of not taking it. Year after year of frustration and underachievement and being called out and just, not knowing why you can't do better. You're smarter than your grades reflect, and you're a nicer person than the kid who doesn't get invited back to birthday parties because you're too impulsive. And, all of that, those are the side effects that really do damage, major damage to self-esteem, ambition, all the stuff that you need to have a good life. So it's just too bad that a very powerful tool. And, there are people who are fanatic in their opposition to it. It's very polarizing. And I just think, gosh, just maintain I call myself a radical moderate. I have a radical passion for holding the middle position. And the middle position is simply this. If you try the medication and it works and doesn't cause side effects, then keep taking it. If you try the medication and it doesn't work or does cause side effects, then stop it. Now, what could be simpler than that? It's just pure common sense. Why do we have to fight over that? It's like saying, if you like asparagus, eat it. Then even though it makes your pee smell funny, you put up with that. But, and if you don't like asparagus, then don't eat it. And the same with these meds. It's just nothing works as powerfully and as immediately as medication. Over the long haul, there are other things that are more powerful, like, finding what I talk about in the new book, a creative outlet, and how important that is, what I call your right difficult. And so over the long haul, the non-medication interventions, marry the right person, find the right job, these basic sort of keys to a good life. But in the beginning, nothing can jumpstart you with the power that medication can.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that perspective. One of the things that you mentioned in the book I thought was really interesting was about I'm going to say this incorrectly, the vestibulocerebellar system.
Very good. You said it properly.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. And its role in people with ADHD, and perhaps more importantly, how exercises and other strategies targeting that system can really support kids. Can you just share what that is?
Well, the bottom line is we never realized how important balance is in cognitive function. You boil it down, and it's a huge major discovery from Jeremy Schmahmann at Mass General Hospital in Boston, Harvard Medical School. We always knew that the cerebellum had a lot to do with balance, but what we didn't know was that there are pathways from the cerebellum at the back of your brain to the front of your brain where the action is in cognition and emotion. And by challenging balance, standing on a wobble board, skateboarding, surfing, skiing, anything that challenges balance, it's really good for ADD. It's amazing that, physical exercise can improve focus, mood, and attention. It's a big breakthrough. One of the best non-medication interventions is a program of cerebellar stimulation, basically challenging balance. I did a whole treatment with a little boy in China. I never even met him. I just did it via email with his mother, a little boy, 8-year-old named Boots. And when his mom presented him to me via email, he was at the bottom of his class in school. He was getting, spanked with a stick, because he couldn't behave himself, and he was a mess. And then this was in September. So I diagnosed him by his history, which no testing. History, by the way, is the way you make the diagnosis. And we set up a program. It began by changing his mindset. We said, look, you're very lucky. You've got a race car for a brain. You've got a way powerful brain, but you've got bicycle brakes. So I'm a brake specialist. And once we help you control the power of your brain, you'll do well. So, he brightens up, his mother describes it. And I say, and can you persuade the teacher to stop hitting him? Let's put an end to physical punishment, because what he needs is encouragement and connection, what I call the other vitamin C. He needs love, and that he'll respond much better to than being, hit, and convinced his dad the same way. So we get insight, we change the crucible he's living into a warm and loving one, and then we have him do these balancing exercises. Well, come Christmas, we're talking September, October, November, December, 4 months. He's number one in his class, no behavioral problems, and he's given the award for Christmas vacation, which is a big chocolate, as the outstanding student. And he brought it home and showed it to his mother, and his mother said, "Oh, great, let's eat the chocolate." And Boots was his name. He put it on the mantelpiece. He said, "Oh no, this is far too precious to eat." So in a short amount of time, I mean, the exercises, I hasten to add, that wasn't the whole story, because creating the connected, warm environment makes a huge difference, and helping him feel proud of who he is makes a huge difference. But you combine all that and you can get really dramatic results, and we didn't use medication at all.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything, because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
If you're a parent, I invite you to join us at the Mindful Mama podcast, where it's all about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. With sometimes hilarious and always thought-provoking experts and friends, at Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm Hunter Clark Fields, and I can't wait to see you there. Listen in to the Mindful Mama podcast.
And you share that story in the book, and it was super interesting, and you shared the exercises that he did in the morning. And I'm thinking, all right, how am I going to incorporate these into our daily life? But it's just really fascinating. And again, new information for me.
One little trick you can do is tell Asher when he gets dressed and undressed not to sit down. So put on and take off your socks without sitting down. Put on and take off your underpants without sitting down. You may stagger a little bit, so have him do it near the bed. So if he falls, he's got something to fall onto. But just that is a good daily, twice a day challenge to balance.
Oh, I love that. All right. Challenge accepted, at least on my end. We'll see what Asher has to say.
You can do it too. I mean, you don't have ADD, but doing this, it does enhance cognitive function in everybody. And by the way, it's also good for your core.
Yeah, it does sound like a win-win. All right, I will do the challenge with Asher. That will probably get a little more buy-in. So you mentioned earlier this idea of finding your right difficult, and I loved that language. You have a whole chapter on that, and it's about that omnipresent experience that so many ADHD people have to make something, and then what can happen if they don't kind of let that itch be scratched, as you say. Do you have any ideas for parents who are listening who want to support their kids and finding the right difficult? What does that look like?
Just let their imagination roam, and play is really where you discover your passions. And my definition of play is any activity in which your imagination lights up. So as long as your imagination is lit up, you're at play, and that's where you'll discover yours. Now, I discovered mine in 12th grade. I mean, I'd always liked to write, but my 12th grade English teacher challenged me to write a novel. And I thought, holy moly, I knew this was a tough school. I didn't know I had to write a novel. But I was the only kid he challenged to do that, so I was kind of flattered. And he said, you have to do it in your own time. And I did. And one page led to another. And by the end of the year, it won the senior English prize, and I'd written a novel, and I had found my passion, in my right difficulty, because writing is extremely difficult, but it's something that I wanted to sacrifice for. I wanted to, and now this is my 21st book, ADHD 2.0. And it's not that I'm ambitious to write books. If I don't have a book going, I get depressed, so I've got to have the creative, my unconscious has got to be engaged in something, or I get depressed. And I think that's a part of ADHD that hasn't been talked about nearly enough, that we really must create. Ordinary life, you see, just doesn't do it for us. Other people, ordinary life is good. You wake up, I'm glad to be alive. Us, it's not good. It's not enough. We've got to boost it up. We've got to pump up the volume. Ordinary life doesn't engage us. So we got to do something to make it more exciting, more beautiful, more majestic, dream big, and writing that novel got me to prove to myself that I could do something that I would have thought was impossible. And I've been trying to do that ever since, usually failing, but I don't care. What I care about is the love of the game. I love the fact that I have writing, and the way some people love golf or something, I love, and golf is a very punishing discipline too, just as writing is, but it's So I think if you can just allow your child to follow his or her imagination and never say something like that's not practical or that's a waste of time or that's silly, that's stupid, just never shame, never, as my old friend used to say, be a dream maker, not a dream breaker. And because these kids will have crazy big dreams that you sort of know won't come true. Well, lo and behold, then they come true.
Let me ask you one more question before we say goodbye. So I talk a lot in the Tilt community about creating a secure world for our differently wired children. And so I really loved the section of your book where you talk about creating stellar environments at home. Any last thoughts on how we can actively create or support a stellar, supportive environment in our home spaces?
Long on trust, long on warmth, low on fear. You wherever you find fear, you want to stamp it out, and my daughter, actually, when she was 13 years old after 9/11, I was supposed to go on TV and give advice. And I asked her, I said, Lucy, what advice should I give? I never forget what she said, Daddy, tell people don't hold back on life out of fear. And, and it's just become truer and truer every year since then. I mean, how many people right now are holding back on life out of fear? And, some of that fear is well-founded, but at the same time, if you keep playing not to lose, you're never going to play to win. If you're always trying to hedge your bets and make everything super safe, it's a mistake a lot of good parents make. They're overprotective. They don't let their kids take chances. So how to create a stellar environment is allow for curiosity, allow for risk taking, but have the rock solid bedrock be you are always loved, no matter what. There is nothing you could do that could talk me into not loving you. Vitamin C, Vitamin Connect. And that is the shock absorber against disappointment, against failure, because you want failure. Failure, it just means you didn't get it that time. And who has ever ridden a bike the first time they get on it? If you can't put up with not getting it right the first time, you're not going to try anything new. And you will use avoidance as a coping style. And that's a terrible coping style. It's why a lot of people never meet the mate they should meet because they're too afraid to ask, or it's why they don't get their question answered in class because they're too afraid to raise their hand. They don't try out for the team or the play or pick up the musical instrument or, whatever. If you just can get past the fear barrier, and the way to do that is to have the loving support. That it was a famous man was once asked how he had achieved so much, and I love his answer. He said, "In my mother's eyes, I only saw smiles." And if you can create, that feeling that when your kid thinks of you or looks at you, he sees you may be angry. I'm not saying you never get angry. Of course, you get angry. You set limits. You can yell and scream, but he sees smiles behind all of that. He knows that you're loving him.
Such a great note to end on. Thank you so much. I just want to say the name of your book again for listeners. It's ADHD 2.0, New Science and Essential Strategies for Thriving with Distraction from Childhood Through Adulthood. It is an easy read with a lot of tangible, practical strategies and information and case studies, and very interesting. So is there anywhere else people should connect with you or anything else you want them to know about?
Well, sure. They can go to my website, drhallowell.com, drhallowell.com. And my new podcast will be getting released in a couple of weeks. It's called Dr. Hallowell's Wonderful World of Different. And I'm going to interview you on that podcast. And then, of course, my books. But I'd love to hear from any of you.
Thank you so much. Listeners, I will include links to all of this in the show notes page. And I think by the time this interview comes out, the podcast should be live. So be sure to go check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. And Ned, thank you so much. I just so appreciated this conversation today.
I loved it. Thanks a million. You're doing great work.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. If you want to dig deeper into this episode, check out the show notes page. Every episode has a dedicated show notes page on my website where you can get links to all the resources we discussed, read a transcript, and even easily go back and listen to key takeaways by using the chapters feature on the podcast player. To get to the show notes page for this episode, just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this show. If you love this podcast and want to help cover the cost of its production, please consider joining my Patreon campaign. For as little as $2 a month, you can help cover the cost of the hosting platform for the show, my wonderful new editor and producer, Andrea, and more. It's so easy to sign up. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more or click on the Patreon link on any show notes page. If you're into social media, you can follow Tilt Parenting at Tilt Parenting on Instagram and Twitter. Visit the Tilt Parenting page on Facebook or join my Facebook community called Tilt Together. Lastly, please help this podcast stay visible and easily found by subscribing and leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information, visit www.tiltparenting.com.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.